So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to our webinar titled Post-Budget Direct Tax Developments. I would like to hand it over to Mr. D. Ram Prasad, Practice Head, ASA Associate, Bangalore.
Yeah, thank you, Avinash. And I am truly grateful to all the people who are registered and who are attending this webinar. We are delighted to actually do this as part of a series of webcasts that will be done by us on the Learn Plus Interactive series that we do for client clinics. And extremely happy to introduce our new tax head of the ASA Bangalore practice, Karthik Shivram, who has come with extensive deep experience on international tax and corporate tax and transfer pricing from Big Four environment. Karthik chose to be an entrepreneur, and we requested him to be an entrepreneur in this setup, and he was very kind to join us. And Karthik will be taking all of us through the direct tax developments, a series of budget announcements in the budget, followed by some announcements by the finance minister. And as we fight the pandemic, there is huge governmental support in form of various measures. And we thought it appropriate that we should probably enlighten our esteemed clients on the summary of them. And with those few words, I hand over the floor to the E-floor, I must say, to Karthik. And over to you, Karthik. Yeah.
Avinash, you have an announcement to make, or can I go ahead?
So before we begin the webinar, here are a few of the pointers. Please note that all the participants will be only in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in question session in the chat. The presentation will be followed by Q&A, and a link of this recording will be emailed to you by tomorrow afternoon. Kindly reach out to us in case you have any difficulty logging in or hearing or viewing. Thank you, and over to you, Karthik.
Thanks, Avinash. So the idea of this session is basically to give a brief of some of the developments which have happened post-budget, because the budget happened in Feb, and then the COVID situation has arisen, and because of that, there are various measures that the government announced as part of the COVID relief measures, and also there have been certain other developments over the last few months which have taken place. So while, of course, these information is in public domain and it keeps popping up, when as and when they are announced, the idea was to have this, session so that we sort of compile some of them which we think are, relevant, and then share our thoughts on this. So basically what we'll be covering are some of the announcements and the measures that are and the recent developments that have happened over the last few months until say about last week, that have happened and that have been announced by the Ministry of Finance or the CBDT, as the case may be. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So as we all know, because of the situation, there was an ordinance which was passed on 31st March 2010, wanting to grant several relief on account of the situation that was that has now been prevailing for the last few months. And some of these provisions were then notified by the CBDT through this notification dated 24th June 2020. Now we will go through some of these. Next slide, please. Again, as you all know, the 1819 return was originally due to be filed by 31st March. Now the extension was granted till July. Now it's been further extended till 30th September. The income tax return for FY 1920 has been extended to 30th November in all cases. The tax audit report, which was again due earlier, has been now extended to 31st October. The one thing that we will also want to highlight, which came as part of the notification, was the fact that in instances where companies or any tax NSSEs were required to pay self-assessment tax, and if it exceeds 1 lakh rupees, The notification stated that in such instances, if suppose the tax is not paid and if it exceeds 1 lakh, then for the purpose of computing interest under 234A, the original deadlines as envisaged in the Act will continue, which means for individuals it would be 31st July, for non-TP companies it would be 31st October, as the case may be. So though the due date for the filing of the return has been extended till 30th November for the purpose of 234A specifically, in such instances where the tax liability exceeds 1 lakh rupees, the due dates to pay the tax as such would be the date of the deadline itself. So in fact, in many of our cases where we filed in individual cases that we were managing, where we realized that based on the last year's precedents, there were instances where people may have to have paid a self-assessment tax exceeding 1 lakh. We had reached out to them and ensured that though the return filing may or may not have happened by 31st July, at least the computation was made and tax liability was determined, and wherever it was exceeding 1 lakh, we ensured that the clients paid the self-assessment tax so that they don't have to incur the interest on 234A. Because what will happen is in the next instance, where for people who companies which have no TP exposure, the deadline being 30th September, if there is any excess tax to be paid and then it's not paid by 30th September, there is a chance that both 234A and 234B interest will run in parallel until such tax is remitted. So we would, want to highlight this point to, so that people can take care of that. The other relief which was also granted was in terms of various investments and deductions that can be claimed in the tax returns. And the government extended the timeline to make such investments up till 31st July. Specifically, one of the funds that was created, which is the PM CASE fund, any contribution to that is also eligible to be claimed under this provision. One specific thing that we wanted to highlight about contributions to PM's CARE fund is that 100% of it is eligible for deduction, and though in ATG there is a limit that if the contributions exceed 10% of the gross income, that to that extent may be capped. In this case, this contribution would not be covered under that restriction. Then similarly, for investments to be made against capital gains, the timeline has been extended to 30th September. And in instances where companies have received approvals to start SEZ units by 31st March, again, the time has been extended till 30th September for them to commence their operations. Next slide, please. One of the other schemes that was introduced by the government was the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, the direct tax under the direct tax regulations, wherein companies can opt to resolve any of their existing litigation under this scheme, which was originally due to have been filed by 31st March by paying of certain amount of tax, and then if it was beyond 31st March by paying some additional amount. But now the timelines for all of these have been extended till 31st December 2020, which means that without having to pay any additional tax, what was the original deadline, which was supposed to be 31st March, has now been extended till 31st December. And in terms of furnishing of TDS and TCS statements, which is basically your 26Q, 26(7)Q, etc., the due date was extended till 31st July 2020, which is expired as of now. Again, the government also made provisions to issue Form 16s and 16As until 15th August 2020, which is also sort of expired now. But these were some of the measures that was granted as part of the relief. The government has also extended the timeline to link PAN and Aadhaar till 31st March 2021. Then, in terms of pending assessments, appeals, etc., a blanket extension has been granted in many instances till about 31st March 2021, and the deadline for ensuring that the assessments do not become debarred has, to that extent, for example, for cases which are for AY 17-18, the timeline has been extended till 31st December, and for cases which were otherwise going to expire in 21. It's been extended till 31st September 2021. As I said, any response, application, etc., filing of appeals, CIT appeals, ITAT appeals, etc., the timelines have been extended till 31st March 2021. The other point we also wanted to highlight is the filing of information under SFT, the Specified Financial Transaction Information, which many of the stakeholders are required to file, for example, banks, sub-registrar offices, etc. That also has been extended till 31st March 2021. As we all know, there is also was a change made in the Form 26AS. Basically, Form 26AS is a statement where an assessee can look at, until now, a list of all the tax credits which have happened in his to his credit against his PAN number, in terms of either tax deduction at source or any advance tax paid or any self-assessment tax paid, and even including details of any refunds that may have been received in the previous years. Now, this form has been modified to include also to report all such information that the department would have received by filing of SFT for, returns by the third parties, so that the taxpayer is aware that wherever there are transactions which breach the certain thresholds which have been entered into by him, it's just to inform the taxpayer that the department is also aware of such transactions by way of this information collected through the SFT procedure, and that information is also being shared with the taxpayers. One recent announcement that was made in respect of the SFT specifically was the fact that the government rather clarified that there is no incident, or there is no requirement on the taxpayer to make any such disclosures in his tax returns. All such information is being gathered by the CBDT through the SFT process, and will continue to be the case. And there is no obligation or requirement for the taxpayer to himself make any such declarations in his tax return. Next slide, please. Again, the government, in view of the cash flow situations that many of the companies were facing, has reduced the or given the benefit of reducing TDS rates by 25%. This was effective from 14th May and is applicable till 31st March 2021. What this means is, instead of a person now earlier where we would possibly deduct a 10% TDS for professional fees, we can now deduct at 7.5%. But what companies and who are possibly at the end of where their receipts are being deducted at lower rates need to be mindful about is the fact that because of this lesser TDS deductions, their advanced tax liabilities may increase. I think that is something that companies need to be mindful about, because this is, while the relief has been granted more from a cash flow perspective in terms of TDS deductions, but ultimately the tax is due to the government. If TDS amounts do not sufficiently cover up your requirements to pay the advance tax installments, then that will have to be factored in. The other relief that was also granted to companies where previously companies had filed for and obtained lower withholding tax rate certifications from the or approvals from the government, was that in instances where such certificates were already issued for 1920 and fresh applications were made for 2021 and no resolution had happened, the government has said that wherever such applications have been filed, the certificate which is valid for 1920 will continue to be valid till 30th June or disposal of the fresh application, as the case may be. Which means that there is a commitment that they have made that wherever applications have been filed, they will try and ensure that such applications will be addressed by 30th June. In suppose instances where again the certificate existed and then no fresh application was filed because of issues and companies may not have filed it, even in such instances, the government has extended the validity of the 1920 certificate until 30th June 2021, But the government has also said clearly that an early effort has to be made by the companies to ensure that they file their applications as soon as possible and preferably by 30th June, so that then the companies, the respective officers can look at these applications and dispose them off accordingly. And the third instance that they've also talked about or touched about is the fact that in suppose instances where no certificate was uh, available for 1920 and 2021 is the first year when a company decided to apply for it. In such instances, they had made a provision where an application can be emailed to the concerned officer, and they would again and it, which would be granted, and then that would be again valid till 30th June, so that then fresh applications in any case can also be made in due course. One point I would also want to touch upon in terms of the reduced TDS rates is that this reduction is applicable only in instances where PAN is available. In such instances where PAN is not available and taxes were to be deducted at a higher rate, which is 20%, that there is no relief in respect of that rate. It continues to be at 20%. So that would not, 20% would not reduce to 15%. So in instances where there is no PAN availability and TDS had to be at higher rates, that provision will continue as is. The other things that the government has also done is to notify the new ITR 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 4, which also have where they've come up with an additional schedule to cover specifically all such instances where people may have made additional contributions to make claim additional deductions under ATC, D, etc. In terms of the relief which was granted earlier, where any such contributions up till 31st July would be counted for the tax deduction or tax computation for 1920. The other relief that has also been granted is in terms of the reporting requirements of GAR and GST, which was to be done under tax audit report, which is earlier held in abeyance until 31st March 2019, which means which was ideally applicable for tax audit report for 31st March 2020, has now been kept in abeyance till 31st March 2021. One of the other relief that the government has also granted is in terms of directing the field officers to issue refunds where in all instances, whether it's an individual assessee or a corporate assessee, wherever the refunds are up to 5 lakh rupees. This is again been done with the intention of increasing liquidity in the hands of the assessees. Similar benefit has also been extended to people who generally have been claiming lower or nil withholding using 15G and 15H, where to the extent that they were not able to submit these forms in the first week of April, where they're generally required to do, that the benefit will be extended till 30th June basis the previous year declarations, and then in due course people can go and then submit the fresh form 15G and 15H applicable for 2021. One of the other relief that was also provided by the government is instances of people who may have been stranded in the country because of the COVID situation, and they've not been able to go back to their country of residence. People who have traveled to India during the period Jan, Feb, and ideally were planning to leave in Feb or March, as the case may be, and they've not been able to travel out. Their extended stay, which otherwise which was not planned for, may have caused issues from their residency perspective under the Income Tax Act. So the government has granted a relief to say that in any such instances where people have not been able to exit the country by 31st March, the period that they may have stayed here between the period where they were between 22nd March and 31st March will be excluded for the purpose of computation of their residential status in India. The point that I want to highlight here again is the fact that this relief has been granted only for period until 31st March 2020. We'll have to wait and see if an extension will be granted for similar relief for covering some of the months in the current year as well, 2021, because there may be many instances where people may have still not have been able to move out or possibly left the country in sometime in March or April, as the case may be. Sorry, April or May, as the case may be, once the flight started in terms of under the government to government arrangement where people or citizens of countries who are stranded in other countries were allowed to travel back to their host countries. We hope that they will consider such situations and hopefully grant an extension for 2021 as well. Next slide, please. The other thing that the government has also done is in terms of extending the applicability of safe harbor rules. This was initially introduced in 2015, and then a subsequent notification was also made in 2017 in terms of rates which are applicable to various companies operating in various industries such as IT, ITES, KPOs, contract pharma, etc. The rates were notified for a period of 3 years, which was applicable for 16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19. Ideally, in the new rules should have come out in the budget provisions, but nothing had come, and therefore there was a question mark on what will be the if safe harbor rules or the benefit of safe harbor can be claimed for 1920. In May, the government has come out with a notification which says that the rates which were notified in 2017 will apply for 1920 as well. This is just an extension for 1 year that has been made, which means that possibly in the next year the government will come out with the new rules which are possibly available for a longer period of time, as was the case previously where it was available for a period of 3 years or 5 years, as the case may be. I think this can also be a good indication of as to how the government is seeing or how the government may have estimated the impact of the current situation on the economy, and if there will be any changes that may be made in the rates which may be offered under the safe harbor rules. One of the other things that has also been introduced, or rather not introduced, but rather revised, are the rules relating to MAP. Now, MAP which is basically mutual agreement procedure, is a tax litigation or dispute resolution mechanism which is available to companies where there have been there are instances of double taxation. So while this was not a very popular option that we've seen many people adopt, for the reason that in the past okay, so just to give a background before basically the way mutual agreement procedure works is, in instances, let's say for example there is an assessment which is completed in respect of an Indian company, and certain adjustments are made in respect of its international transactions, which is with its related parties or associated enterprises, as the case may be. What tends to happen is that while India will of course also pay tax on any such additional income which has been computed in its hands, a corresponding adjustment would not have been available to the related party or the associated enterprise in their country of residence. So in such instances, companies had the option, or the overseas associated enterprises had the option to initiate a application under the mutual agreement procedure in their source country, in their resident country of residence, to say that they are at a disadvantage because of the action taken by the Indian tax authorities, and seek a relief, which then once initiated, the Indian company would also have filed an application, similar application, with the Indian competent authorities, and a resolution would happen by way of the tax authorities of both these countries meeting together and coming to an agreement as to, if suppose the adjustments are indeed valid or not, and if it is valid, to what extent the adjustments are necessary to be retained. The reason why this was not a very popular option possibly was for the fact that until very recently, or at the advent of the advance pricing agreement regime, the instances where the meetings that were to happen between the tax authorities of the two countries were very limited. So the cases under MAP resolution would take many years, and possibly companies had relief that they could get to the dispute resolution mechanisms available locally in terms of CIT appeals or ITAT, as the case may be. But I think what people also that there are still companies which continue to opt for this option even under such a situation, because under certain double taxation avoidance agreements under which this MAP procedure in fact can be initiated, had granted a benefit that wherever such an application has been filed and has been accepted, any tax demand which has been challenged under this procedure can be kept in abeyance subject to meeting certain conditions, such as filing of furnishing of bank guarantees, etc. This was particularly available under the DTAs between India and USA and India and UK. But again, earlier this year, a couple of months ago, the government has now revised the rules relating to the implementation of MAP by making amendments in the income tax rules. And recently, CBDT has also come out with a guidance note on how they plan to approach the mutual agreement procedure process. Some of the key things that we wanted to highlight to you because which are coming out of this guidance note is the fact that the timeline within which this mutual agreement procedure can be initiated is within 3 years from the time of the first cause of action where the disadvantage is caused, in the sense that when, for instance, when an assessment is completed and a final order has been issued and a demand notice has been issued, 3 years from that date is within the timeline by within the overseas associated enterprise had to initiate this MAP procedure in their country, as well as a corresponding application had to be made by the Indian company before the Indian competent authorities. While there were instances where there were some variations between what is the time limit available based on the respective DTAs, the Indian government has now, or through this guidance note, has it's stated that they will try to give this benefit of up to 3 years to a large number of cases as possible, and wherever through either by making necessary modifications in the respective DTAs or under the provisions of the multilateral MLIs, multilateral instruments that the India has become a signatory of. The other commitment sort of that the guidance note tries to make is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why probably people were not very keen on that this option was for the timelines involved in it. Again, they have said now that they will try and ensure that on an average, they will try and close these cases within 24 months. This may seem more likely in the current scenario because, as I touched upon earlier, because of the advent of the advanced pricing agreement regime, where companies have the option to seek not just an unilateral APA, but also a bilateral APA. And many such applications have been filed and have been in fact also resolved or agreed to, and APA agreements have been signed. Because of this APA scheme coming in, the interactions between the competent authorities of India and various other countries have increased dramatically over the last few years, specifically with respect to wanting to quickly close the APA applications. So, and the team which generally would negotiate a bilateral APA are the same people who would be involved in resolving the MAP applications as well.